have enough confidence, or maybe just ignorance of myself, to try and attempt this. Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht. Okay, hopefully the melody sounds familiar enough. Have you heard of the Christmas miracle during World War I? It's known also as the Christmas truce. It's 1914, Europe is locked in the Great War, and on the Western Front, German and British soldiers facing each other across what became to be known as a desolate no man's land. There's barbed wire stretched for miles, trenches are freezing, and despair is just hanging heavy in the air. And then on Christmas Eve, 1914, the unbelievable happens. This is a true story, documented in history. Little lights begin to appear in the German trenches, and there are candles flickering against the dark night sky. Across no man's land, British soldiers then began to hear what first it seemed the haunting melody of Silent Night, but sung in German, of course. And then they eventually joined singing in English. Then, even more miraculously, soon men emerged, exchanging gifts and sharing food. And so for a moment, the light of Christmas pierced the darkness of war. This really happened. Now, this story reminds us that the light of Christmas, it shines even in the darkest darkness, the deepest darkness. And Advent, hopefully you caught it even from today's scripture reading, one point of Advent is about light breaking into our darkness. And just as historically this Christmas truce, this Christmas miracle brought hope, Isaiah's prophecy today, it offers even a far greater hope, a brighter brightness, a beacon of eternal light and salvation. Not just momentary, but eternal light and salvation. And so we're kicking off our Advent series, Prayers of Christmas. And each Sunday, our hope is that you'll draw strength from prayers connected to the Christmas story. And that this will help prepare our hearts to celebrate Christ's birth on Christmas. But even beyond that, that it would continue to just stir our hearts to long for Christ's second advent, his final advent, for his return. Now today we begin with Isaiah's prophecy of Christmas, and just to give a spoiler, it is a prophecy about Christmas. Hopefully you caught it. It prophesies this child being born. And we'll see later on in the message just how that really connects. But if you'll just believe me, this really is a prayer, a Christmas prayer, a prophetic declaration. Now, Isaiah 9, it offers a call certainly as stirring as the Christmas truce, the Christmas miracle in World War I, but with far greater stakes. It's a prayer that longs for and looks forward to Christmas, to Jesus' birth, and it doesn't just inspire. Hopefully you were inspired by that piece of history, but Isaiah 9, it goes beyond inspiration. It declares eternal hope. So my hope is that our hearts, by faith, as we interact with Isaiah 9, that something would stir in our hearts by faith, a response, something like, Lord, help me celebrate Christmas with the prophetic meaning that you intended. Help me celebrate Christmas with the prophetic meaning that you intended. Not the way, what it's become, our commercialism, but what you intended. So for the rest of our time, I hope this question will help guide us along, that help you just track with the sermon. What joy does Isaiah's Christmas prayer invite us to? What joy does Isaiah's prophetic Christmas declaration offer us? And I want to do my best to show you three things that I think Isaiah wants us to see. First, he invites us to celebrate the light of Christmas. Second, to celebrate the victory of Christmas. And third, to celebrate the King of Christmas and his coming government. So let's dive in. Again, what joy does Isaiah's Christmas prayer, his prophetic declaration, invite us to? And so first, to celebrate the light of Christmas. We see this as we pick up, and we'll just chronologically comb through the passage as we go to verse 1. But there will be no gloom. I'll explain the historical context in a second. But now, where there was gloom, there's going to be no more gloom for her who was in anguish. In the former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. These are two of the tribes of Israel. And basically, you can think of them as provinces. Like in Canada, we have provinces. You could just basically think of them as two of the provinces of Israel, two of the people of Israel. But in the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. That's where Naphtali and Zebulun geographically were located. But notice what's highlighted here. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them light has shone. Now what's going on here then, Isaiah is prophesying at a time when Assyria had come in and just ransacked and invaded Israel, and Naphtali and Zebulun were the gateway, were the pathway into Israel. And so they were captives. There were just horrific things going on, egregious things, and people being taken prisoner and taken back to Assyria. And all this, God had patiently been warning Israel for centuries. Basically, they were facing the consequences of having broken covenant with God. And finally, what God had promised in terms of consequence of straying away from him and following other gods, it came to pass as Assyria came and ransacked Israel and took them captive into exile. Isaiah here, he's addressing both Israel's historical oppression and, beyond that, more gravely, a great spiritual dire situation. But now, Isaiah is prophesying some hope, that there's going to be deliverance. And so Zebulun and Naphtali, the northern regions of Israel, as they suffered the brunt of Assyrian conquest and exile, Isaiah was beginning to say, don't worry, there's going to be little hope. Now, when we read books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, the prophets, you need to read them at two levels. First level is, how is this relevant to the history of Israel's story immediately, in that immediate history and context? But oftentimes what's going on is that God is also giving a message to his people for something far into the future. And so certainly, first, we need to ask ourselves, did Zebulun and Naphtali ever truly emerge from this kind of glorious, from darkness to glorious brightness in history? Maybe for a little bit in history, but not to the extent that's prophesied here. Their historical restoration, it never matched the grandeur of Isaiah's vision. And even as we look at Israel today, it's going through so much tumult. So we need to understand, we need to realize that Isaiah's prophecy, it's pointing something to far greater, something far further into the future. So let's first ask, to try to bring this closer to home. Certainly there was a darkness then, and then there was a little glimmer of light that was shining in their history. But to apply it to our lives today, what darkness do you see as you look out onto the world? Right now, 2024, is there darkness? As you look out, what darkness do you see? And as you see that darkness, maybe it's broken systems, global injustices, fractured relationships, maybe things at work, whatever it may be, how do you respond to that darkness? More specifically, what's your proposed solution? I'm asking this to both friends who don't believe yet and to Christian brothers and sisters. As you see the darkness out there, what is the solution in your eyes? What will actually bring light to this darkness? Now, I ask that because if we're honest, both Christian and not, oftentimes we are tempted to create our own artificial lights. For everyone, it's different, but generally speaking, a lot of people go after wealth, power, progress, all these things that maybe bring a little bit of light for a moment, but then they guaranteed always dim at some point. They don't shine and produce the restoration that we would want it to fully and permanently produce. So that begs the question, hopefully your heart is asking it right now, what or who will shine perpetually without dimming? What will fulfill Isaiah's prophecy of a great light that shines on in perpetuity and never dims? So I just want you to hold on to that question as we continue. Moving on, again, we're asking the question, what joy does Isaiah's Christmas prayer offer us? What joy does he invite us into? And second, I think he would want us to get some sense of celebrating a victory. There's a victory that is associated with the Christmas story, the Christmas that Isaiah was looking forward to. As we continue on and pick up in verse 3, notice how much joy there is here, okay? At least 5 to 7 times joy. You have multiplied the nation. This is Isaiah beginning to speak hope into Naphtali and Zebulun, and so they're multiplying again. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest. Now notice the metaphor here. A lot of hard work has gone in, a lot of sowing, a lot of tilling, a lot of nurturing, and just the seasons being timely and water coming and the rains and so forth, and then the hard work of actually harvesting, fighting off pests and so forth. And they are glad, more joy, when they divide the spoil. Again, this is a picture of a long, hard-fought battle, and then being victorious at the end and being rightfully enjoying the rewards, the spoils of that hard-fought fight. For the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken. And this is now Israel looking to God, that God has broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the tramping warrior in battle tumult and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. This is more joy here. This day of Midian, this is referring back to Judges chapter 7. Isaiah's just jogging Israel's memory back to Gideon's victory. If you're not familiar with Gideon and how he won victory, the essence of it was that God provided victory through a weak Gideon and a weak army. God brought the victory. It's really a picture of God's grace being victorious. That this victory and this joy is solely because of God's undeserved help. That's the joy. And look at how much victory there really is. That meaning, even all the battle clothes, there's such, all tumult is so eradicated, all the strife is so just wiped away that all the battle clothes can just be burnt up once and for all in the fire. No more fighting. The point here, Isaiah's point here, and we get it when we understand the word he chooses for joy in the Hebrew. It's a word for joy that carries the sense of not fleeting happiness. It's a joy that lasts. It comes from a divine deliverance. It's a divine celebration rooted in divine deliverance that God has helped. Listen to this excerpt. Yesterday we emailed out an Advent devotional that we encourage you to use just to help reflect this season. And listen to this excerpt from one of the devotions. The gospel is bigger than a nativity scene. The incarnation of Jesus Christ was an invasion, both a dawning of peace and a declaration of war. The baby in the manger didn't stay there. He grew up and obeyed his father to the point of death, even death on a cross. Suspended on Roman wood, he made peace between God and man. See, Isaiah, he's looking forward to this. There's a light that shines, and at the end of that light is this victory, and it's a victory. The war that Jesus declared is a war on sin and all the consequences of sin, including death, and one day all sickness, all disease, all strife, all war. That's the grandness of what Isaiah is looking forward to. So what about us? Christmas is a busy time, not just because of traditions and shopping, but for a lot of you, for work, it's busy. It's a busy season. As you find yourself stressed and fighting for whatever it is at work, maybe you're fighting against someone, maybe you're fighting at home, all this strife, all this stress, all this energy, what are you fighting for? What victory are you trying to secure? And if you get that victory, is it worth it? Or is it just a fleeting happiness? And if that victory comes, can you with clear conscience say, that victory came because of God's grace? This victory in my life, like Gideon, it's because of God's grace. I can say wholeheartedly, with gladness, with humility, God helped me. This was His will. Will those victories that you're fighting for be lasting joy or just fleeting happiness? And our modern Christmases, what it's turned into, it doesn't help. It only amplifies the fact that we have to fight for our happiness and what is often just fleeting happiness. Just even the commercialization of this season, it masks a longing for more, a lust for more with the veneer of gift giving. And all that ability even to gift give, if we're not going into debt, it's because we've worked hard, we fought to afford the ability to give those gifts and maybe treat ourselves to vacations or whatever. But all these things, if we're honest, they're just fleeting victories, fleeting happiness. So again, put differently, are your victories by God's grace or by your own strength? So this leads us to our final point. Again, what joy does Isaiah's prophetic Christmas prayer invite us to? Does it offer us? Finally, celebrate the King. Celebrate the King of Christmas and His coming government. Now, Isaiah, he certainly longed for a great light, and he describes this great light that shines in this deep darkness that leads to this great victory. Reminds me of, and hopefully this picture just makes it more alive to you. If you're a Tolkien fan, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, you'll know that Aragorn had to go and fight at Helm's Deep, but he was fearing that he's outnumbered, and Gandalf the White, he tells Aragorn, look to my coming on the first light of the fifth day. At dawn, look to the east. And the movie just brings it to life so well. They're in this dark valley. Looks like they're outnumbered. They're going to be defeated. And then at the top, the mountaintop, Gandalf shows, and he's just brilliant. He's just shining white. And then he comes down with reinforcements, and they win. Spoiler alert. Isaiah, he is describing something even brighter. Even brighter. He's revealing something even greater. And this source of this greatest light, this greatest brightness and victory, it's not an army or a battle. It's a baby. It's a child. But a child king who is born in Bethlehem. And not only that, this, as the quote I read earlier from the Advent devotional says so beautifully, this child king would grow to become a man king. And this man king would hang on a cross. But why? Because he came to inaugurate his government. It's going to be a government it's inaugurated now. There are signs of it, but it's going to be fully realized and culminated, established once and for all in eternity, after Judgment Day, in the new heavens and the new earth. Now let's see what Isaiah says about this. Go to his words as we pick up in verse 6. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Now, this makes complete sense. Let's just think about very practically. It makes complete sense that Isaiah would care for a government. As he is trying to figure out hope for Israel, it makes practical sense that he would think about a government, a quality government, because governments shape the tone and quality of our lives. The headlines every day are full of just ways the government is, hopefully they're doing some things well, but mostly headlines of maybe the way they're screwing things up. We're scared right now because of a new government coming down in the south, and 25% tariffs and so forth and so forth. So this is very practical. But I want you to notice, and I think what Isaiah would want us to see, is that he envisions a government unlike anything the world has ever known or will know, at least during history, at least up until eternity. A reign of perfect peace, unshakable justice, and eternal righteousness. Where do we see that? We see it in the way this child king is described. Wonderful Counselor, meaning someone who has the soundest wisdom, has omniscience to discern flawlessly right from wrong, and to guide us as a perfect advisor with perfect insight and fairness and righteousness. But not only is he Wonderful Counselor and omniscient, he's Mighty God. He's omnipotent. He wields divine power to actually save and sustain his people and to execute his righteousness. But he's not only mighty, he's everlasting Father. There's a tenderness to this king. There's a fatherly love that is steadfast, protective, nurturing, like a perfect father's care. And of course, Prince of Peace. Peace was such an important word for the Jewish people, as it should still be for the church today, this notion of shalom. If you can just stretch your mind and try to imagine a perfect wholeness. Our culture longs for it. They want wholeness. Imagine a perfect wholeness, not only individually, but as a society, a perfect restoration, a flourishing. That's what shalom is, from a wholeness coming, a healthy flourishing. Isaiah's point is this, and what we see here is this is so high, the standard is so high, no mere human ruler, no mere human could ever match these titles. No one ever has, in terms of just pure human kings or queens, monarchs, presidents, prime ministers, what have you, CEOs, directors, whatever. And no mere human ever will. Now, in Isaiah's time, remember, these prophecies, you want to understand at first immediate context, but then there's always a deeper, farther-reaching meaning. In Isaiah's time, commentators believe they thought maybe King Hezekiah was the answer to this prayer, this longing. And even as Hezekiah was one of the brighter kings in Israel's history, he fell far short of these standards. So again, this begs the question, who is this child king? Who is this child king? Let's return to Isaiah's great light in verses 1 and 2. Remember, Isaiah describes in verses 1 and 2 a great light dawning on Zebulun and Naphtali. But this restoration, we know, didn't happen fully the way it's pictured here in their immediate history. Now, to appreciate this, I'm dating myself. When I was a kid in the 80s, does anyone remember these magic eye pictures? Believe it or not, if you strain your eyes a certain way and squint a certain way, in this pattern, this 2D pattern, a 3D image will pop out. I haven't been able to figure this one out yet, but I remember when I finally figured out the first one, I walked away with a headache and I needed Tylenol. My eyes had gone so cross-eyed to see it. Now, I just offer this analogy, this metaphor in a sense. It looks like just a 2D pattern, but when you focus your eyes in just the right way, a stunning 3D image emerges, and Isaiah 9 is like this magic eye picture. Maybe I should just remove this because I don't want you to get distracted for the rest of the sermon. Just focus on the message, okay? Don't try to see it. But Isaiah 9 is like this magic eye picture in that there's something deeper, there's something more pronounced, with more shape. Thankfully, God gives us a set of lenses to not have to strain so hard. And so as we turn to Matthew chapter 4, verses 13 to 17, it reveals the 3D image. And leaving Nazareth, he, Jesus, went and lived in Capernaum by the sea in the territory of Zebulun, ring a bell, and Naphtali, ring another bell, so that what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah might be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, the way of the sea beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people dwelling in darkness have seen a great light. From that time, Jesus began to preach, saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." What's Jesus himself saying? I'm the child king. And Matthew is affirming it. And everyone the apostles, they affirm this. Jesus is the fulfillment of Isaiah 9. The whole time, Isaiah was looking forward to Jesus. And he died in faith, even though he didn't see him with his own eyes. He died believing some 600 years later that this child king would appear. So the Gospels, what they speak powerfully to us today, what Matthew is saying is that Isaiah's prophetic Christmas prayer, Christmas itself, it invites us to the joy and hope in Christ Jesus as King and to long for his kingdom. This child king would leave the cradle to grow up and be hung on a Roman cross, to battle, to shed his own blood, but not just to fight and lose, but to win the victory over your sin, my sin, and all the wages of sin, death and sickness and disease and all the curses that were laid upon us in Genesis 3. To put it beautifully, positively, to reconcile us to God. So it challenges us to stop placing ultimate trust in human rulers and systems, recognizing instead that only Christ's reign can bring the peace and wholeness that we long for. Remember, I asked earlier, in your mind, whatever darkness you see out there, what's your proposed solution? What's the solution? Who's the solution? And so this is so relevant to us, especially still in 2024. Look, Isaiah brings up the topic of governments because practically speaking, the end game of Christianity, it's looking forward to a king and his perfect government in the new heavens and new earth. This is going to be just a general observation, very high-level observation, but as we look at our governments, generally speaking, at least the country we live in, the left, it idolizes freedom of self-expression apart from God's design, and perhaps trusting in government, human government, to facilitate those freedoms and be the savior. The right idolizes freedom of self-interest, self-service, and where they tend to err is rejecting God's call to generosity, a radical generosity, and really radically caring for those on the margins while elevating their own individual wealth. But what the gospel would call out to both and everyone in between, what's common to all of us, every government, every human being, is we idolize our human autonomy. Whether it shows up as moral relativism or unchecked individualism, what's common at the root, we all idolize our human autonomy. We want to be God. And the gospel critiques the whole spectrum. It calls the left to submit to God's design for human flourishing. It calls the right to lay down power and wealth in the service of others. It reminds both that human governments will dim. They'll always fall short. Because true peace, true shalom, God's shalom, isn't just the absence of conflict, it's the presence of God and the wholeness that He brings that begins in the soul as we're reconciled at the root of our issues, which is our sin. And so again, just to be clear, the end game, the reign of shalom, Christ's shalom, is the end game of Christianity. And so as we await Christ's final advent, we have a sacred purpose. Church, we have a sacred purpose. We're called to be signposts of this coming kingdom. That call hasn't changed. Jesus' mission hasn't changed. To call out to our friends, our family, our culture, to turn around. That's what repent means, just to turn around, to consider humbly Christ as King. And so to be signposts of this coming kingdom, reflecting His light, embodying His victory, and modeling His peace. The way we go about it certainly needs to embody this part of who this child king is, Prince of Peace. And through our worship, our relationships, our service, we give the world a glimpse of the King and His reign. And so this King Jesus, Christmas is beautiful, it's wonderful, but He's not just King of the cradle, He's King of the cosmos. This whole time, this is the King that Isaiah was longing for. And this is the King that we celebrate at Christmas. This is the King who will reign forever. So how's your prayer life going this calendar year? Our vision, our overall vision, even the umbrella that even these prayers of Christmas come under is, Lord, teach us to pray. So even from this passage, I want to commend to you just 3 ways that you can go deeper into your prayer life, and would love to just see more of you just even join our intercessory prayer time Saturday morning. Join us for our early morning prayer. I hope there's wonderful, warm, fervent prayer going on in your small groups, your new communities. But here are 3 ways from today's passage. First, pray for Christ's light to shine in your darkest moments. Long for His light. Don't try to light your own artificial light that will eventually dim. Pray that Christ's light will shine, that you'll experience that. You'll know what that looks like. Second, pray for victory in your life that comes by God's grace. May you live out a story that is full of victory. But may those victories come because it's the result of a process of walking humbly with God, depending on His grace, depending on Him every step of the way, trusting not in your own heart, but trusting the Lord with all your heart, leaning not on your own understanding, but in every way acknowledging Him. And pray for Christ's reign in your heart, in others' hearts, and the knowledge, grace, and strength to signpost His kingdom well.